Hello, welcome sa ating 8th live stream. Wala pang tao. Please share, like, and subscribe. Mega love shout out to Josh TV. Shout out to Adrian James. Gwapo daw siya. Mega love shout out to JM Cruz, Dan Tamsak host. Morning ka na, JM? Mega love shout out to RJJKLR Vlog Army BTS. Hi kuya. Hello din sa iyo RJJKLR Vlog Army. May tumatawag sa Facebook. Mga Vlog Army na yata yun ah. Again, mega love shout out to JM Cruz at sa mga BTS Army dyan. Maraming salamat sa pa-heart natin dyan, JM. Please like, share, and subscribe sa mga hindi pa nakasubscribe dyan. Welcome host, sabi ni JM Cruz. Maraming salamat JM sa support. Balita ko, konting-konti na lang. Support nyo din po si JM Cruz, guys. Kong Ivan, Tamsak, Dan Host. Hello Kong Ivan. Maraming salamat sa iyong pagdalaw. Kung di dahil sa iyo, hindi na ulit ako mag-LS. Thank God at andyan ka. May tumatawag sa FB. Ano nga to? Mega love shout out to JM at kay Kong Ivan at sa mga BTS Army dyan. Ha ha ha, sabi ni Army BTS. Sayang, tawagin mo na yung mga army mo. RJJ KLR. Mega love shoutout again sa mga nakatambay at we have 2 million people in the house. Hello JM. Wala yata tayong work dyan at nakatambay tayo ngayon Tama, dapat pahinga-pahinga din pag may time. Ay, oo nga pala. Saglit lang Kalimutan kong i-jacket si Master Kong Ivan Kong Ivan is now a moderator. May jacket ka na, boss. Salamat sa iyong pagtambay, Sir Kong Ivan. Si Kong Ivan nga pala may team paakyat. Pwede rin tayong pumasok sa kanya para magkaroon tayo ng maraming friendship. Welcome, Sir Kong Ivan. Sayang dito StreamYard oh. Yung StreamYard pwede kang makyat ngayon oh. Ayan si Kong Ivan naglapag ng kanyang bahay. Pwede nating dikitan. Hintay nga kita nakaraan LS ko akyat sana. Oo nga eh. Kaso nagising yung baby. Kaya yun, bantay ng bata. Kailan nagkaulit LS Kong Ivan? Medyo mainit guys kasi hindi tayo naka-aircon. Ayos lang host, my next time naman, sabi ni Kong Ivan. Maraming salamat nga pala Kong Ivan sa pagbisita sa aking bahay. Sana all si Kuya naka-live, sabi ni RJJ KLR Vlog Army ng mga BTS. Pag maka-live ka Kong Ivan, akyat din ako sa LS mo. Ganda nga yung StreamYard eh. Kaso doon kasi may mapag free, may limit lang yung oras. Baka mamaya or bukas nag-iimpake na kasi Pawi ng Pinas. Wow! Malapit nang umuwi si boss. Congrats. At makakakita ka na rin ng nilagang sinilangan. Huwag kalimutan ang mga pasalubong ha. StreamYard host, December na ulit kasi 20 hours lang per month. Magamit ko na lahat. Oo nga eh, pag StreamYard kasi meron talagang limit. Pero Kong Ivan yung OBS non-stop, tapos ito yung ginagamit ko ngayon, OBS, which is free lang talaga siya. Pero I don't think kung pwede sa cellphone, pero gamit ko ngayon is laptop. Sa Pinas na ako bibili, baka may COVID, mga sokalalate dito. Oo nga eh. Baka magka-COVID pa yung mga materials dyan. Pero nice yung StreamYard. Free lang, mura lang naman, kaso yun nga eh. Kailangan paglaanan ng time talaga. Masubukan nga yung OBS sa 3,310 ko. Ano yun? 3,310. 3310. Pwede siguro. Malay natin. Well, time check for today is 5:55 early in the afternoon. And currently playing Dark Side by Nemee Keeyo. Kaya nga akala ko 3,310 pera. Guys, tamsakan lang tayo ha. At nagbaba ng bahay si Boss Kong Ivan. At dalaw-dalaw tayo sa kanyang team. Meron din po siyang team paakyat. Which is, meron din po siyang FB na Ivan Balilo ang pangalan. Mega love shoutout to Kong Ivan, RJJ, KLR, Vlog Army, BTS, JM Cruz, Josh TV. Salamat sa pag-promote, host, sabi ni Kong Ivan. Walang problema, Kong Ivan. Wala namang bayad. It's all for free, sabi nga nila. Buti andyan ka, no? Hindi, ayaw na naman. Mukha na naman tayong alien. Anong oras nga pala dyan, Kong Ivan? Dyan sa Saudi. Dalawin ko muna mga ibang tropa, tamsakan dito ko din sila. Okay, no problem po. Habang busy sa pag-impang, nakaplay lang ako sa LS ng tropa. Okay, Boss Ivan, maraming salamat sa iyong pagdalaw. Start na mga impake, baka may maiwanan tayo dyan.
The Power of Now. Eckhart Tolle. Chapter 8. By Mark Allen, author of Visionary Business and
Power Up Now. Kwentuhan ko na lang kayo guys. Meron akong librong nabasa, The Power of Now. Simulan natin ulit. Saan na ba yun? Tapos ko lang, malapit na. Simulan natin yung introduction ng libro. Ang title ng librong ito ay The Power of Now at ang author is Eckhart Tolle. Ang ganda ng librong to. Promise. Babasahin ko para sa inyo. Labas muna natin yung libro kasi baka mamaya mag-copyright tayo. Ayusin natin. Yan, ito yung libro guys. Yan, i-arrange natin itong mga abubot na to. Tapos hanapin ko yung babasahin ko para marinig niyong lahat. Okay, start na tayo. Ito yung simula ng introduction ng libro. I have little use for the past and rarely think about it. However, I would briefly like to tell you how I came to be a spiritual teacher and how this book came into existence. Until my 30th year, I lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety, interspersed with periods of suicidal depression. Feels now as if I am talking about some past lifetime or somebody else's life. One night, not long after my 29th birthday, I woke up in the early hours with a feeling of absolute dread. I had woken up with such a feeling many times before, but this time it was more intense than it had ever been. The silence of the night, the vague outlines of the furniture in the dark room, the distant noise of a passing train, everything felt so alien, so hostile and so utterly meaningless that it created in me a deep loathing of the world. Break time muna guys . Ayan, balik na tayo. Saan na ba yun? Wala. Ayan. The most loathsome thing of all, however, was my own existence. What was the point in continuing to live with this burden of misery? Why carry on with this continuous struggle? I could feel that a deep longing for annihilation, for non-existence, was now becoming much stronger than the instinctive desire to continue to live. I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly, I became aware of what a peculiar thought it was. And I, one or two. If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, the I and the self that I cannot live with. Maybe I thought only one of them is real. I was so stunned by this strange realization that my mind stopped. I was fully conscious, but there were no more thoughts. Then I felt drawn into what seemed like a vortex of energy. It was a slow movement at first and then accelerated. I was gripped by an intense fear and my body started to shake. I hear the words "resist nothing" as if spoken inside my chest. I could feel myself being sucked into a void. It felt as if the void was inside myself rather than outside. Suddenly, there was no more fear, and I let myself fall into that void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. I was awakened by the chirping of a bird outside the window. I never heard such a sound before. My eyes were still closed and I saw the image of a precious diamond. Yes, if a diamond could make a sound, this is what it would be like. I opened my eyes. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains. Without any thought, I knew that there is infinitely more to light than we realize. That soft luminosity filtering through the curtains was love itself. Tears came into my eyes. I got up and walked around the room. Mega love shout out to Azil Ashram, Tamsak host. Maraming salamat sa patamsak mo dyan, Azil Ashram. I recognized the room and yet I knew that I had never truly seen it before. Everything was fresh and pristine, as if it had just come into existence. Peace be with you, Azil Ashram. Maraming salamat sa patambay at sa pagdalaw. God bless. I pick up things, a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and aliveness of it all. That day, I walked around the city in utter amazement at the miracle of life on earth, as if I had just been born into this world. For the next 5 months, I live in a state of uninterrupted, deep peace and bliss. After that, it diminished somewhat in intensity, or perhaps it just seemed to because it became my natural state. Maraming salamat sa mga nakatambay dyan. Kanya-kanyang trip para makapagsalita lang tayo ng tuloy-tuloy. could still function in the world, although I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I already had. I knew, of course, that something profoundly significant had happened to me, but I didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years later, after I had read the spiritual texts and spent time with spiritual teachers. Oo nga eh, kanya-kanya lang trip yan. Maraming salamat sa tumambay ah. Okay, tuloy-tuloy tayo. That I realized that what everybody was looking for had already happened to me. I understood that the intense pressure of suffering that night must have forced my consciousness to withdraw from its identification with the unhappy and deeply fearful self, which is ultimately a fiction of the mind. This withdrawal must have been so complete that this false, suffering self immediately collapsed, just as if a plug had been pulled out of an inflatable toy. What was left then was my true nature as the ever-present I am consciousness in its pure state prior to identification with form. Later, I also learned to go into that inner timeless and deathless realm that I had originally received as a void and remain fully conscious. I dwelt in states of such indescribable bliss and sacredness that even the original experience I just described pales in comparison. A time came when, for a while, I was left with nothing on the physical plane. I had no relationships, no job, no home, no socially defined identity. I spent almost 2 years sitting on park benches in a state of the most intense joy. But even the most beautiful experiences come and go. More fundamental, perhaps, than any experience is the undercurrent of peace that has never left me since then. Sometimes it is very strong, almost palpable, and others can feel it too. At other times, it is somewhere in the background like a distant melody. Later, people would occasionally come up to me and say, "I want what you have. Can you give it to me? Or show me how to get it?" And I would say, "You have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise." That answer later grew into the book that you are holding in your hands. Before I knew it, I had an external identity again. I had become a spiritual teacher. The truth that is within you. This book represents the essence of my work as far as it can be conveyed in words with individuals and small groups of spiritual seekers during the past 10 years. In Europe and in North America, in deep love and appreciation, I would like to thank those exceptional people for their courage, their willingness to embrace inner change, their challenging questions, and their readiness to listen. This book would not have come into existence without them. They belong to what is as yet a small but fortunately growing minority of spiritual pioneers. People who are reaching a point where they become capable of breaking out of inherited collective mind patterns that have kept humans in bondage to suffering for aeons. I trust that this book will find its way to those who are ready for such radical inner transformation and so act as a catalyst for it. I also hope that it will reach many others who will find its content worthy of consideration, although they may not be ready to fully live or practice it. It is possible that at a later time, the seed that was sown when reading this book will merge with me seed of enlightenment that each human being carries within. And suddenly, that seed will sprout and come alive within them. The book in its present form originated, often spontaneously, in response to questions asked by individuals in seminars, meditation classes, and private counseling sessions, and so I have kept the question and answer format. I learn and receive as much in those classes and sessions as the questionnaires. Some of the questions and answer I wrote down almost verbatim. Others are generic, which is to say, I combine certain types of questions that were frequently asked into one and extracted the essence from different answers to form one generic answer. Sometimes in the process of writing, an entirely new answer came that was more profound or insightful to provide further clarifications of certain points. You will find that from the first to the last page, the dialogues continuously alternate between two different levels. On one level, I drew your attention to what is false in you. I speak of the nature of human unconsciousness and dysfunction, as well as its most common behavioral manifestations, from conflict in relationships to warfare between tribes or nations. Sarblog TV, sabi ni Azil Ashram. On the level, I drew your attention. Such knowledge is vital, for unless you learn to recognize the false as false, as not you, there can be no lasting transformation, and you would always end up being drawn back into illusion and into some form of pain. On this level, I also show you how to not make that which is false in you into a self and into a personal problem. For that is how the false perpetuates itself. On another level, I speak of a profound transformation of human consciousness that is a distant future possibility, but available now no matter who or where you are. You are shown how to free yourself from enslavement to the mind, enter into this enlightened state of consciousness and sustain it in everyday life. On this level of the book, the words are not always concerned with information, but often designed to draw you into this new consciousness as you read. Again and again, I endeavor to take you with me into the timeless state of intense, conscious presence in the now, so as to give you a taste of enlightenment until you are able to experience what I speak of. You may find those passages somewhat repetitive. As soon as you do, however, I believe you will realize that they contain a great deal of spiritual power, and they may become for you the most rewarding parts of the book. Moreover, since every person carries the seed of the enlightenment within, I often address myself to the knower and you who dwells behind the thinker. The deeper self that immediately recognizes spiritual truth resonates with it and gains strength from it. The pause symbol after certain passages is a suggestion that you may want to stop reading for a moment, become still, and feel and experience the truth of what has just been said. There may be other places in the text where you will do this naturally and spontaneously. As you begin reading the book, the meaning of certain words such as being or presence may not be entirely clear to you at first. Just read on. Questions or objections may occasionally come in your mind as you read. They will probably be answered later in the book, or they may turn out to be irrelevant as you go more deeply into the teaching and into yourself. Don't read with the mind only. Watch out for any feelings response as you read and a sense of recognition from deep within. I cannot tell you any spiritual truth that deep within you don't know already. All I can do is remind you of what you have forgotten. Living knowledge, ancient and yet ever new, is then activated and released from within every cell of your body. The mind always wants to recognize and compare, but this book will work better for you if you do not attempt to compare its terminology with that of other teachings. Otherwise, you will probably become confused. I use words such as mind, happiness, and consciousness in ways that you not necessarily correlate with others' teachings. Don't get attached to any words. They are only stepping stones to be left behind as quickly as possible. When I occasionally quote the words of Jesus or the Buddha from a course in the miracles or from other teachings, I do so not in order to compare, but to draw your attention to the fact that in essence, there is and always has been only one spiritual teaching. Although it comes in many forms, some of these forms, such as the ancient religions, have become so overlaid with extraneous matter that their spiritual essence has become almost completely obscured by it. To a large extent, therefore, their deeper meaning is no longer recognized and their transformative power lost. When I quote from the ancient religions or other teachings, it is to reveal their deeper meaning and thereby restore their transformative power, particularly for those readers who are followers for these religions or teachings. I say to them, there is no need to go elsewhere for the truth. Let me show you how to go more deeply into what you already have. Mostly, however, I may have endeavored to use terminology that is neutral as possible in order to reach a wide range of people. This book can be seen as a restatement for our time of that one timeless spiritual teaching, the essence of all religions. It is not derived from external sources, but from the one true source within. So it contains no theory or speculation. I speak from inner experience, and at times I speak forcefully. It is to cut through heavy layers of mental resistance and to reach that place within you where you already know. Just as I know, and where the truth is recognized when it is heard, there is then a feeling of exaltation and heightened aliveness, as something within you says, yes, I know this is true. Chapter 1. You are not your mind. The greatest obstacle to enlightenment. Enlightenment? What is that? I have a story. A beggar had been sitting by the side of a road for over 30 years. One day, a stranger walked by. "Spare some change," mumbled the beggar, mechanically holding out his old baseball cap. "I have nothing to give you," said the stranger. Then he asked, "What's that you are sitting on?" "Nothing," replied the beggar, "just an old box. I have been sitting on it for as long as I can remember." "Ever look inside?" asked the stranger. "No," said the beggar. "What's the point? There's nothing in there?" asked the stranger. "No," said the beggar. The beggar managed to pry open the lid. With astonishment, disbelief, and elation, he saw that the box was filled with gold. "I am that stranger who has nothing to give you," and who is telling you to look inside, not inside any box, as in the parable, but somewhere even closer inside yourself. But I am not a beggar, I can hear you say. Those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being, and the deep, unshakable peace that comes with it, are beggars, even if they have great material wealth. They are looking outside for scraps of pleasures or fulfillment. Jacob Vlogs, thumbs up host. Maraming salamat Jacob Vlogs. Dayan Ninja here. Maraming salamat Dayan sa iyong ninja. Kanya-kanyang trip lang to. Kasi wala kang masyadong viewers. Well anyway, maraming salamat Dayan Ninja for coming up. For validation, security, or love. Well, they have a treasure within that not only includes all those things but is infinitely greater than anything the world can offer. The world enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego likes to keep it that way. But it is simply your natural state of felt oneness with being. It is a state of connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, something that almost paradoxically is essentially you and yet is much greater than you. It is finding your true nature beyond name and form. The inability to feel disconnectedness gives rise to the illusion of separation from yourself and from the world around you. You then perceive yourself consciously or unconsciously as an isolated fragment. Fear arises and conflict within and without becomes the norm. I love the Buddha's simple definition of enlightenment as the end of suffering. There is nothing superhuman in that. Is there? Of course. As a definition, it is incomplete. It only tells you what enlightenment is not. No suffering. But what's left when there is no more suffering? The Buddha is silent on that, and his silence implies that you will have to find out for yourself. He uses a negative definition so that the mind cannot make it into something to believe in or into superhuman accomplishment, a goal that is impossible for you to attain. Despite this precaution, the majority of Buddhists still believes that enlightenment is for the Buddha. Not for them, at least not in this lifetime. You use the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? Being the eternal, ever-present one life beyond the myriad forms or life that are subject to birth and death. However, being is not only beyond but also deep within every form, as its innermost invisible and indestructible essence. This means that it is accessible to you now as your own deepest self, your true nature. But Don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can now, it only when the mind is still, when you are present, when your attention is fully and intensely in the now. Being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. To regain awareness of being and to abide in the state of feeling, realization is enlightenment. When you say being, are you talking about God? If you are, then why don't you say it? The word God has become empty of meaning through thousands of years of misuse. I use it sometimes, but I do so sparingly. By misuse, I mean that people who have never even glimpsed the realm of the sacred, the infinite vastness behind the word, use it with great conviction as if they knew what they are talking about God. Or they argue against it as if they knew what it is that they are denying. This misuse gives rise to absurd beliefs, assertions, and egoic delusions such as my or our God is the only true God and your God is false. Or Nietzsche's famous statement, God is dead. The word God has become a close concept. The moment the word is uttered, a mental image is created, no longer perhaps of an old man with a white beard, but still a mental representation of someone or something outside you, and yes, almost inevitably a male of someone or something. Neither God nor being nor any other word can define or explain the ineffable reality behind the word. So the only important question is whether the word is a help or a hindrance in enabling you to experience that toward which it points. Does it point beyond itself to that transcendental reality, or does it lend itself too easily to becoming no more than an idea in your head that you believe in, a mental idol? The word being explains nothing, but nor does God. Being, however, has the advantage that it is an open concept. It does not reduce the infinite invisible to a finite entity. It is impossible to form a mental image of it. The body can claim exclusive possession of being. It is your very essence, and it is immediately accessible to you as the feeling of your own presence. The realization I am that is prior to I am this or I am that. So it is only a small step from the word being to the experience of being. What is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? A Identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it. So it is considered normal. This incessant noise prevents you from finding the realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind-made self that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at all that in more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed that he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his most famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." He had in fact given expression to the most basic errors to equate thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in a state of apparent separateness in an insanely complex world of continuous problem and conflict. A world that reflects that ever-increasing fragmentation of the mind. Enlightenment is a state of a wholeness of being at one, and therefore at peace. At one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as with your deepest self and life unmanifested, at one with being. Enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and of continuous conflict within and without, but also the end of the dreadful enslavement to incessant thinking. What an incredible liberation this is! Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that blocks all true relationship. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is this screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there is you and a totally separate other. You then forget the essential fact that underneath the level of physical appearances and separate forms, you are the one with all that is. By forget, I mean that you can no longer feel this oneness as a self-evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but you no longer knows it to be true. A belief may be comforting only through your own experience. However, does it become liberating? Thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there is nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body, but when this process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have disease. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. To put it more accurately, it is not so much that you use your mind wrongly. You usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is the disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion. The instrument has taken you over. I don't quite agree. It is true that I do a lot of aimless thinking, like most people, but I can still choose to use my mind to get and accomplish things, and I do that all the time. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean that you use your mind. Just as dogs love to chew bones, the mind loves to get its teeth into problems. That's why it does crossword puzzles and builds atom bombs. You have no interest in either. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean to stop thinking altogether? No, I can't, except maybe for a moment or two. Then the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it, so you don't even know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without thinking, without knowing it, and sue you to take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken, freeing yourself from your mind. What exactly do you mean by that? Watching the thinker. When someone goes to the doctor and says, I hear a voice in my head, he or she will most likely be sent to a psychiatrist. The fact is that in a very similar way, virtually everyone hears a voice or several voices in their head all the time. The involuntary thought processes that you don't realize you have the power to stop. Continuous monologues or dialogues. You have probably come across mad people in the street incessantly talking or muttering to themselves. Well, that's not much different from what you and all other normal people do, except that you don't do it out loud. The voice comments, speculates, judges, compares, complains, likes, dislikes, and so on. The voice isn't necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It may be reviving the recent or distant past, or rehearsing or imagining possible future situations where it often imagines things going wrong and negative outcomes. This is called worry. Sometimes the soundtrack is accompanied by visual images or mental movies. Even if the voice is relevant to the situation at hand, it will interpret it in terms of the past. This is because the voice belongs to your conditioned mind, which is the result of all your past history. as well as of the collective cultural mindset you inherited. So you use and judge the present through the eyes of the past and get a totally distorted view of it. It is not uncommon for the voice to be a person's own worst enemy. Many people live with a tormentor in their head that continuously attacks and punishes them and drains them of vital energy. It is the cause of untold misery and unhappiness as well as of disease. The good news is that you can free yourself from your mind. This is the only true liberation. You can take the first step right now. Start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can. Pay particular attention to any repetitive thought patterns, those old gramophone records that have been playing in your head, perhaps for many years. This is what I mean by watching the thinker, which is another way of saying listen to the voice in your head. Be there as the witnessing presence. When you listen to that voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge. Do not judge or condemn what you hear, or doing so would mean that the same voice has come in again through the back door. You will soon realize there is the voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. This I am realization. The sense of your own presence is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind. So when you listen to a thought, you are aware not only of the thought but also of yourself as the witness of that thought. A new dimension of consciousness has come in. As you listen to that thought, you feel a conscious presence. Your deeper self, behind or underneath the thought, it as it were. The thought then loses its power over you and quickly subsides because you are no longer energizing the mind through identification with it. This is the beginning of the end of the involuntary and compulsive thinking. When a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. Again, when a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. At first, the gaps will be short, a few seconds perhaps, but gradually they will become longer. When these gaps occur, you feel a certain stillness and peace inside you. This is the beginning of your natural state of felt oneness with being, which is usually obscured by the mind. With practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end to its depth. You will also feel a sublimination of joy arising from deep within, the joy of being. It is not a trance-like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. If the price of peace were a lowering of your consciousness and the price of stillness a lack of vitality and alertness, then they would not be worth having. In this state of inner connectedness, you are much more alert, more awake than in the mind. Identified state. You are fully present. It also raises the vibrational frequency of the energy field that gives life to the physical body. As you go more deeply into this realm of no mind, as it is sometimes called in the East, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In that state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and such joy that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body, as well as the whole external world become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish, but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you are previously thought of as yourself. That presence is essentially you, and at the same time inconceivably greater than you. What I am trying to convey here may sound paradoxical or even contradictory, but there is no other way that I can express it. Instead of watching the thinker, you can also create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is a deeply satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from mind activity and create a gap of no mind in which you are highly alert and aware but not thinking. This is the essence of meditation. In your everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only a means to an end and giving it your fullest attention so that it becomes an end in itself. For example, every time you walk up and down the stairs in your house or place of work, pay close attention to every step, every moment, even your breathing. Be totally present. Or when you wash your hands, pay attention to all the sense of perceptions associated with the activity, the sound and feel of the water, the movement of your hands, the scent of the soap, and so on. Or when you get into your car, after you close the door, pause for a few seconds and observe the flow of your breath. Become aware of a silent but powerful sense of presence. There is one certain criterion by which you can measure your success in this practice: the degree of peace that you feel within. So the single most vital step on your journey toward enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. One day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head, as you would smile the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind all as seriously, as your sense of self does not depend on it. Enlightenment rising above thought. Isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? Your mind is an instrument, a tool. It is there to be used for speed tasks. And when the task is completed, you lay it down. As it is, I would say about 82% of most people thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of its dysfunctional and often negative nature, much of it is also harmful. Observe your mind, and you will find this to be true. It causes a serious leakage of vital energy. The kind of compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. What characterizes an addiction? Quite simply this: you no longer feel that you have the choice to stop. It seems stronger than you. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure. Pleasure that invariably turns into pain. Why should we be addicted to thinking? Because you are identified with it, which means that you derive your sense of self from the content and activity of your mind. Because you believe that you would cease to be if you are stopped thinking. As you grow up, you form a mental image of who you are. Based on your personal and cultural conditioning, we may call this phantom self the ego. It consists of mind activity and can only be kept going through constant thinking. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it, here it means a false self, created by unconscious identification with the mind. To the ego, present moment hardly exists. Only past and future are considered important. This total reversal of the truth accounts for the fact that in the ego mode, the mind is so dysfunctional. It always concerned with keeping the past alive, because without it, who are you? It constantly projects itself into the future to ensure its continued survival and to seek some kind of release or fulfillment there. It says, one day when this, that, or the other happens, I am going to be okay, happy, at peace. Even when the ego seems to be concerned with the present, it is not the present that it sees. It misperceives it completely because it looks at it through the eyes of the past, or it reduces the present to a means to an end that always lies in the mind projected future. Observe your mind and you will see that this is how it works. The present moment holds the key to liberation, but you cannot find the present moment as long as you are your mind. I don't want to lose my ability to analyze and discriminate. I wouldn't mind learning to think more clearly in a more focused way, but I don't want to lose my mind. The gift of thought is the most precious thing we have. Without it, we would just be another species of animal. The predominance of mind is no more than a stage in the evolution of consciousness. We need to go on to the next stage now as a matter of urgency, otherwise we will be destroyed by the mind, which has grown into a monster. I will talk about this in more detail later. Thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is the only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. Enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought. The level of an animal or a plant. In the enlightened state, you will use your thinking mind when needed, but in a much more focused and effective way than before. You use it mostly for practical purposes, but you are free of the involuntary internal dialogue, and there is inner stillness when you do use your mind, and particularly when a creative solution is needed. You oscillate every few minutes or so between thought and stillness, between mind and no mind. No mind is consciousness without thought. Only in that way is it possible to think creatively, because only in that way does thought have any real power. Thought alone, when it is no longer connected with the much vaster realm of consciousness, quickly becomes barren, insane, destructive. The mind is essentially a survival machine, attack and defense against other minds, gathering, storing, and analyzing information. This is what it is good at, but it is not at all creative. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. The mind then gives form to the creative impulse or insight. Even the great scientists have reported. Mega love shout out to Quaben's Chris Angel. Shout out po host Tamsak Yahoo. Hello host, galing mo naman, DJ na DJ. Maraming salamat sis Quaben's Chris Angel. Trip lang to sis para magkaroon tayo ng maraming views. Sarblog, hello sis, sabi ni Quaben's Chris Angel. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. Sana all, sabi ni Quaben's Chris Angel. Sa lahat ng mga kaibigan ko dyan, maraming salamat. Sa mga nakatambay at sa mga pabalik-balik pong mga kaibigan, well, maraming salamat po. The mind then gives form to the creative impulse or insight. Even the great scientists have reported that the creative breakthroughs came at a time of mental quietude. Share ko LS Mo host. Maraming salamat sis Quaben's Chris Angel sa pag-share in advance. Thank you. The surprising result of a nationwide inquiry among America's most eminent mathematicians, including Einstein, to find out their working methods. Was that thinking plays only a subordinate part in the brief, decisive base of the creative act itself. So I would say that the simple reason why the majority of scientists are not creative is not because they don't know how to think, but because they don't know how to stop thinking. It wasn't through the mind, through thinking, that the miracle that is life on earth done share, sabi ni Quabens Chris Angel. Maraming salamat sis at sa tropang Pochi. It wasn't through the mind, through thinking, that the miracle that is life on earth of your body were created and are being sustained. There is clearly an intelligence at work that is far greater than the mind. How can a single human cell measuring 1:1000 of an inch across contains instruction with its DNA? Enjoy hosting, sabi ni Quabens Chris Angel. Maraming salamat sis Quabens Chris sa iyong pa-share at sa iyong pag-comment. Contains instruction with it in its DNA that would fill 1,000 books of 100 pages each. The more we learn about the working of the body, the more we realize just how vast is the intelligence at work within it and how little we know. When the mind reconnects with that, it becomes a most wonderful tool. It then serves something greater than itself. BG ko na lang ninja ko kasi sabay kayo nila Bin dyan. Okay sis, no problem. Emotion. The body's reaction to your mind. What about emotions? I get caught up in my emotions more than I do in my mind. Mind, in the way I use the word, is not just thought. It includes your emotions as well as all unconsciousness, mental, emotional, reactive patterns. Emotions arises at the place where mind and the body meet. It is the body's reaction to your mind, or you might say, a reflection of your mind in the body. For example, an attack thought or a hostile thought will create a buildup of energy in the body that we call anger. The body is getting ready to fight. The thought that you are being threatened physically or psychologically causes the body to contract. And this is the physical side of what we call fear. Research has shown that strong emotions even cause changes in the biochemistry of the body. These biochemical changes represent the physical or material aspect of the emotion. Of course, you are not usually conscious of all your thought patterns, and it is often only through watching your emotions that you can bring them into awareness. The more you are identified with your thinking, your likes and dislikes, judgments and interpretations, which is to say the less present you are as the watching consciousness, the stronger the emotional energy charge will be, whether you are aware of it or not. If you cannot feel your emotions, if you are cut off from them, you will eventually experience them on a purely physical level. Mega love shout out Lance Blog. Peace be with you, whether you are aware of it or not. Nagluto ako host kaya naka-BG. Maraming salamat Lance Blog. At sana'y masarap ang luto natin dyan. Dito lang host, no problem, no problem. Maraming salamat sa pagtambay, Lance Blog. If you are cut off from them, you will eventually experience them on a purely physical level, as a physical problem or symptom. Dayan here. Okay. Si Dayan nga pala tong Lance Vlog natin Mashed potatoes lang. Mashed potatoes lamang. Masarap yan sis, yung mashed potatoes natin dyan. Ganda ng boses natin host. Maraming salamat Lance Vlog, DJ Yuhu. Oo nga Nakachambahan, ginamitan ng effects. Maraming salamat anyway. Shout out to Lance Vlog. Nakapag-live ka ngayon. Oo nga medyo hindi na siya masyadong busy na natenga doon sa Mobile Legend. Kaso nung wala, panay talo, back to zero, bumalik na naman ako dito. Shout out na lang. Mega love shout out to Lance Vlog at sa kanyang Dayan Vlog 101 na channel. Thank you very much. Adik pala to sa ML, same boss dyan. Oo nga nakaka-addict talaga yung ML. Ewan ko si CR Vlog, parang malapit na rin ma-addict kaso ano na raw babalik na raw siya sa pag edit niya ng YouTube channel niya. Well anyway, maraming salamat at ingat ka sa iyong pagluto at sana'y gabayan ka sa iyong panlasa. Joke lang. A great deal has been written about this in recent years, so we don't need to go into it here. Agoy Sar Vlog, wag ka na dumagdag, sabi ni Lance Vlog. Oo nga pag kami dalawa mag-ML niyan, wala na, patay na. Kaya ito, back to live. A strong unconscious emotional pattern may even manifest as an external event that appears to just happen to you. For example, I have observed that people who carry a lot of anger inside without being aware of it and without expressing it are more likely to be attacked, verbally or even physically, by by other angry people, and often for no apparent reason. They have a strong emanation of anger that certain people pick up subliminally, and that triggers their own latent anger. If you have difficulty feeling your emotions, start by focusing attention on the inner energy field of your body. Feel the body from within. This will also put you in touch with your emotions. We will explore this in more detail later. Kanta ka na, host, sabi ni Lance Vlog. Nako po, dito na lang muna tayo sa pagbabasa ng libro. Parang radio station tayo, host. Oh, may technique dito, Lance. Ang technique dito, audio ducking. Automatic siya na si-switch yung sounds, maglo-low at saka mag-high. Pag magsasalita ka, bababa siya. Kaya parang radio ang dating. Pero hindi naman. Pwede na maging DJ talaga. Oo nga eh. DJ sa barangay. Ganun po ba sa mic ba yan? Actually, nagkamali ako eh. Padalos-dalos kasi kami eh. Or I even say padalos-dalos ako. I think pag may mic ka, okay na. Hindi pala. Actually, hindi ganito yung sound ng mic. Pangit. Kailangan mo ng application na voice meter para maano mo talaga kung ano yung voice mo. And then i-adjust mo yung yung pan. Ewan ko kung anong klaseng pan yan. Pandesal ba yan? Ayun. You say that an emotion is the mind's reflection in the body, but sometimes there is a conflict between the two. The mind says no, while the emotion says yes, or the other way around. If you really want to know your mind, the body will always gives you a truthful reflection. So look at the emotion, or rather feel it in your body. If there is an apparent conflict between them, the thought will be the lie. The emotion will be the truth. Not the ultimate truth of who you are, but the relative truth of your state of mind at that time. Conflict between the surface, thoughts and unconscious mental processes is certainly common. Mega love shoutout to Mikay Ramada. Eto na ako. Sermon yun sis kanina, sabi ni Lance Vlog. Guavans Chris Angel, Yahoo, sis sir, by Mikay Ramada. You may not yet be able to bring your unconscious mind activity into awareness as thoughts, but it will always be reflected in the body as an emotion. CC Sarblog, ikaw na mag-addict muna, susunod na ako, sabi ni Lance Vlog. Sa'yo yata natuto yan, Lance, sa paggawa ng Reface. At siya'y na-addict na ngayon sa Reface app. And on this you can become aware. To watch the emotion in this way is basically the same as listening to or watching a thought, which I described earlier. Makinig lang kami dito, host. Magbasa ka lang. Di ako marunong sa ML. Madali lang yon. Kayang-kaya yon. Ikaw pa. Dance Vlog. The only difference is that while a thought is in your head, an emotion has a strong physical component and so is primarily felt in the body. You can then allow the emotion to be there without being controlled by it. You no longer are the emotion, you are the watcher, the observing presence. If you practice this, all that is unconscious, and you will be brought into the light of consciousness. Present thumbs up done by Ninja Dayan. Maraming salamat sa mga Ninja Army Dayan. So observing our emotions is as important as observing our thoughts. Yes, make it a habit to ask yourself, what's going on inside me at this moment? That question will point you in the right direction. But don't analyze, just watch. Focus your attention within. Feel the energy of the emotion. If there is no emotion present, take your attention more deeply into the inner energy field of your body. It is the doorway into being. An emotion usually represents an amplified and energized thought pattern. And because of its open, overpowering energetic charge, it is not easily initially to stay present enough to be able to watch it. It wants you to take you over, and it usually succeeds, unless there is enough presence in you. If you are pulled into unconscious identification with the emotion through the lack of presence, which is normal, the emotion temporarily becomes you. Often a vicious circle builds up between your thinking and the emotion. They feed each other. The thought pattern creates a magnified reflection of itself in the form of an emotion, and the vibrational frequency of the emotion keeps feeding the original thought pattern. By dwelling mentally on the situation, event, or person that is the perceived cause of the emotion, the thought feeds energy to the emotion, which in turn energizes the thought pattern, and so on. Basically, all emotions are modifications of one primordial, undifferentiated emotion that has its origin in the loss of awareness of who you are beyond name and form. Because of its undifferentiated nature, it is hard to find a name that precisely describes this emotion. Fear comes close, but apart from a continuous sense of threat, it includes a deep sense of abandonment and incompleteness. It may be best to use a term that is as undifferentiated as that basic emotion and simply call it pain. One of the main tasks of the mind is to fight or remove that emotional pain, which is one of the reasons for its incessant activity. But all it can ever achieve is to cover it up temporarily. In fact, the harder the mind struggles to get rid of that pain, the greater the pain. The mind can never find the solution, nor can it afford to allow you to find the solution, because it is itself an intrinsic part of the problem. Imagine a chief of police trying to find an arsonist when the arsonist is the chief of police. You will not be free of that pain until you cease to derive your sense of self from identification with the mind, which is to say, from ego. The mind is then toppled from its place of power and being reveals itself as your true nature. Yes, I know what you are going to ask. I was going to ask, what about positive emotions such as love and joy? They are inseparable from your natural state of inner connectedness with being. Glimpses of love and joy or brief moments of deep peace are possible whenever a gap occurs in the stream of thought. For most people, such gaps happen rarely and only accidentally, in moments when the mind is rendered speechless. Sometimes triggered by great beauty, extreme physical exertion, or even great danger. Suddenly, there is inner stillness, and within that stillness, there is a subtle but intense joy. There is love, there is peace. Usually, such moments are short-lived, as the mind quickly resumes its noise-making activity that we call thinking. Love, joy, and peace are deep states of being, or rather three aspects of the state of inner connectedness with being. As such, they have no opposite. This is because they arise from beyond the mind. Emotions, on the other hand, being part of the dualistic mind, are subject to the law of opposites. This simply means that you cannot have good without bad. So the unenlightened, mind-identified condition, what is sometimes wrongly called joy, is the usually short-lived. The pleasure side of the continuously alternating pain-pleasure cycle. Pleasure is always derived from something outside you, whereas joy arises from within. The very thing that gives you pleasure today will give you pain tomorrow, or it will leave you. So its absence will give you the pain. And what is often referred to as love may be pleasurable and exciting for a while, but it is an addictive, clinging, an extremely needy condition that can turn into its opposite at the flick of a switch. Many love relationships, after the initial euphoria has passed, actually oscillate between love and hate, attraction and attack. Real love doesn't make you suffer. How could it? It doesn't suddenly turn into hate, nor does real joy turn into your pain. As I said, even before you are enlightened, before you have freed yourself from your mind, you may get glimpses of true joy, true love, or of a deep inner peace, still but vibrantly alive. These are the aspects of your true nature, which is usually obscured by the mind. Even with an abnormal, addictive relationship, there can be moments when the presence of something more genuine, something incorruptible, can be felt. But they will only be glimpses, soon to be covered up again through mind interference. It may then seem that you had something very precious and lost it, or your mind may convince you that it was all an illusion anyway. The truth is that it wasn't an illusion, and you cannot lose it. It is part of your natural state, which can be obscured but can never be destroyed by the mind. Even when the sky is heavily overcast, the sun hasn't disappeared. It's still there on the other side of the clouds. The Buddha says that pain or suffering arises through desire or craving and want, and that to be free of pain, we need to cut the bonds of desire. All cravings are the mind seeking salvation or fulfillment in external things and in the future as a substitute for the joy of being. As long as I am my mind, as long as I am my mind, I am those cravings, those needs, wants, attachments, and aversions. And apart from them there is no I, except as a mere possibility, an unfulfilled potential, a seed that has not yet sprouted. In that state, even my desire to become free or enlightened is just another craving for fulfillment or completion in the future. So don't seek to become free of desire or achieve enlightenment. Become present. Be there as the observer of the mind. Instead of quoting the Buddha, be the Buddha. Be the awakened one, which is that the word Buddha means. Humans have been in the grip of pain for eons. ever since they fell from the state of grace, entered the realm of time and mind, and lost awareness of being. At that point, they started to perceive themselves as meaningless fragments in an alien universe, unconnected to the source and to each other. Pain is inevitable as long as you are identified with your mind, which is to say, as long as you are unconscious, spiritually speaking. I am talking here primarily of emotional pain, which is also the main cause of physical pain and physical disease. Resentment, hatred, self-pity, guilt, anger, depression, jealousy, and so on, even the slightest irritation, are all forms of pain. And every pleasure or emotional high contains within itself the seed of pain, its inseparable opposite, which will manifest in time. Anybody who has ever taken drugs to get high will know that the high eventually turns into a low, that the pleasure turns into some form of pain. Many people also know from their own experience how easily and quickly an intimate relationship can turn from a source of pleasure to a source of pain. Seen from a higher perspective, both the negative and the positive polarities are faces of the same coin, are both part of the underlying pain that is inseparable from the mind identified egoic state of consciousness. There are two levels. Tamsak Dan, sabi ni Dayan Vlog 101. Maraming salamat Dayan Vlog 101 sa iyong pagtamsak na bago dyan. Time check is 7:49 in the evening here in the Philippines. There are two levels to your pain. The pain that you create now and the pain from the past that still lives on in your mind and body. Ceasing to create pain in the present and dissolving past pain. This is what I want to talk about now. Consciousness, the way out of pain. Create no more pain in the present. A body's life is entirely free of pain and sorrow. Isn't it a question of learning to live with them rather than trying to avoid them? The greater part of human pain is unnecessary. It is self-created as long as the unobserved mind runs your life. The pain that you create now is always some form of non-acceptance, some form of unconscious resistance to what is. On the level of thought, the resistance is some form of judgment. On the emotional level, it is some form of negativity. The intensity of the pain depends on the degree of resistance to the present moment, and this in turn depends on how strongly you are identified with your mind. The mind always seeks to deny the now and to escape from it. In other words, the more you are identified with your mind, the more you suffer. Huh? Ulitin ko ha. The mind always seeks to deny the now and to escape from it. In other words, the more you are identified with your mind, the more you suffer. Or you may put it like this: the more you are able to honor and accept the now, the more you are free of pain, of suffering, and free of the egoic mind. Or you may put it like this again: the more you are able to honor and accept the now, the more you are free of pain, of suffering, and free of the egoic mind. Why does the mind habitually deny or resist the now or ngayon? Because it cannot function and remain in control without time, which is past and future. So it perceives the timeless now as threatening. Time and mind are in fact inseparable. Imagining the earth devoid of human life, inhabited only by plants and animals, would it still have a past and a future? Could we still pick up time in any meaningful way? The question, what time is it? Or what's the date today? If anybody were there to ask it, would be quite meaningless. The oak tree or the eagle would be bemused by such a question. What time? They would ask. Well, of course, it's now. The time is now. What time? What else is there? Yes, we need the mind as well as time to function in this world. But there comes a point where they take over our lives. And this is where dysfunction, pain, and sorrow set in. The mind, to ensure that it remains in control, seeks continuously to cover up the present moment with past and future, and so, as the vitality in the infinite creative potential of being, which is inseparable from the now, becomes covered up by the time, your true nature becomes obscured by the mind. An increasingly heavy burden of time has been accumulating in the human mind. All individuals are suffering under this burden, but they also keep adding to it every moment whenever they ignore or deny that precious moment or reduce it to a means of getting to some future moment, which only exists in the mind, never in actuality. The accumulation of time in the collective and individual human mind also holds a vast amount of residual pain from the past. If you no longer want to create pain for yourself and others, if you no longer want to add the residue of past pain that still lives on in you, then don't create any more time. Or at least no more than is necessary to deal with the practical aspect of your life. How to stop creating time? Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now and primary focus of your life, whereas before you dwelt in time, it paid brief visits to the now. Have you dwelling place in the now and pay brief visits to past and future when required to deal with the practical aspects of your life situation. Always say yes to the present moment. What could be more futile or insane than to create inner resistance to something that already is? What could be more insane than to opposite life itself, which is now and always now? Surrender to what is. Say yes to life and see how life suddenly starts working for you rather than against you. The present moment is sometimes unacceptable, unpleasant, or awful. It is as it is. Observe how the mind labels it and how this labeling process, this continuous sitting in judgment, creates pain and happiness. Creates pain and unhappiness. By watching the mechanics of the mind, you step out of its resistance patterns and you can then allow the present moment to be. This will give you a taste of the state of inner freedom from external conditions, the state of true inner peace. Then see what happens and take action if necessary or possible. Accept, then act. Whatever the present moment contains, accept it as if you had chosen it. Always work with it, not against it. Make it your friend and ally, not your enemy. This will miraculously transform your whole life. Past pain, dissolving the pain body. As long as you are unable to access the power of the now, every emotional pain that you experience leaves behind a residue of pain that lives on in you. It merges with the pain from the past, which was already there, and becomes lodged in your mind and body. This, of course, includes the pain you suffered as a child, caused by the unconsciousness of the world into which you were born. This accumulated pain is a negative energy field that occupies your body and mind. If you look on it as an invisible entity in its own right, you are getting quite close to the truth. It's the emotional pain body. It has two modes of being, dormant and active. A pain body may be dormant 90% of the time, and a deeply unhappy person. Huh? A pain body may be dormant 90% of the time in deeply unhappy person. True, it may be active up to 100% of the time. Some people live almost entirely through their pain body, while others may experience it only in certain situations, such as intimate relationships or situations linked with past loss or abandonment. Physical or emotional hurt, and so on. Anything can trigger it, particularly if it resonates with a pain pattern from your past. When it is already to awaken from its dormant stage, even a thought or an innocent remark made by someone close to you can activate it. Some pain bodies are obnoxious but relatively harmless, For example, like a child who won't stop whining, others are vicious and destructive. Monsters, true demons. Some are physically violent, many more are emotionally violent. Some will attack people around you or close to you, while others may attack to you, their host. Thoughts and feelings you have about your life then become deeply negative and self-destructive. Illnesses and accidents are often created in this way. Some pain bodies drive their host to suicide. When you thought you knew a person and then you are suddenly confronted with this alien, nasty creature, for the first time you are in for quite a shock. However, it's more important to observe it in yourself than in someone else. Watch out for any sign of unhappiness in yourself, in whatever form. It may be the awakening pain body. This can take the form of irritations, impatience, a somber mood, a desire to hurt, anger, rage, depression, a need to have some drama in your relationship, and so on. Catch it that moment it awakens from its dormant state. The pain body wants to survive just like every other entity in existence, and it can only survive if it gets you to unconsciously identify with it. It can then arise up, take you over, become you, and live through you. It needs to get its food through you. It will feed on any experience that resonates with its own kind of energy. Anything that creates further pain in whatever form, anger, destructiveness, hatred, grief, emotional drama, violence, and even illness. So the pain body, when it has taken you over, will create a situation in your life that reflects back its own energy frequency for it to feed on. Pain can only feed on pain. Pain cannot feed on joy. It finds it's quite indigestible. Once the pain body has taken you over, you want more pain. You become a victim or a perpetrator. You want to inflict pain, or you want to suffer pain, or both. There isn't really much difference between the two. You are not conscious of this, of course, and will vehemently claim that you do not want pain. But look closely, and you will find that your thinking and behavior are designed to keep the pain going for yourself and others. If you were truly conscious of it, the pattern would dissolve. For to want more pain is insanity, and nobody is consciously insane. The pain body, which is the dark shadow cast by the ego, is actually afraid of the light of your consciousness. It is afraid of being found out. Its survival depends on your unconscious identification with it, as well as on your unconscious fear of facing the pain that lives in you. But if you don't face it, if you don't bring the light of your consciousness into the pain, you will be forced to relive it again and again. The pain body may seem to you like a dangerous monster that you cannot bear to look at, but I assure you that it is an unsubstantial phantom that cannot prevail against the power of your presence. Some spiritual teachings state that all pain is ultimately an illusion, and this is true. Some question is it true for you? A mere belief doesn't make it true. Do you want to experience pain for the rest of your life and keep saying that it is an illusion? Does that free you from the pain? What we are concerned with here is how you can realize this truth. That is, make it real in your own experience. So the pain body, which is the dark shadow cast by the ego, is actually afraid of the light of your consciousness. It is afraid of being found out. Its survival depends on your unconscious identification with it, as well as on your unconscious fear of facing the pain that lives in you. But if you don't face it, if you don't bring the light of your consciousness into the pain, you will be forced to relive it again and again. So the pain body doesn't want you to observe it directly and see it for what it is. The moment you observe it, feel its energy field within you and take your attention into it. The identification is broken. A higher dimension of consciousness has come in. I call it presence. You are now the witness or the watcher of the pain body. This means that it cannot use you anymore by pretending to be you, and it can no longer replenish itself through you. You have found your own innermost strength. You have accessed the power of now. What happens to the pain body when he becomes conscious enough to break our identification with it? Unconscious creates it. Consciousness transmits itself. Saint Paul expressed this universal principle beautifully. Everything is shown up by being exposed to the light. And whatever is exposed to the light itself becomes the light. Just as you cannot fight the darkness, you cannot fight the main body or the pain body. Trying to do so would create inner conflict and thus further pain. Watching it is enough. Watching it implies accepting it as part of what is at that moment. The pain body consists of trapped life energy that has split off from your total energy field and has temporarily becomes autonomous through the unnatural process of mind and identification. It has turned in on itself and become anti-life. Like an animal trying to bore its own tail. Why do you think our civilization has become so life-destructive? But even the life-destructive forces are still life energy. When you start to disidentify and become the watcher, the pain body will continue to operate for a while and will try to trick you into identifying with it again. Although you are no longer energizing it through your identification, it has a certain momentum, just like a spinning wheel that will keep turning for a while, even when it is no longer being propelled. At this stage, it may also create physical aches and pains in different parts of the body, but they won't last. Stay present, stay conscious, be the ever alert guardian of your inner space. You need to be present enough to be able to watch the pain body directly and feel its energy. It then cannot control your thinking. The moment your thinking is aligned with the energy field of the pain body, you are identified with it and again feeding it with your thoughts. For example, if anger is the predominant energy vibration of the pain body and you think angry thoughts, dwelling on what someone did to you or what you are going to do to him or her, then you have become unconscious and the pain body has become you. Where there is anger, there is always pain underneath. Or when a dark mood comes upon you and you start getting into a negative mind pattern and thinking how dreadful your life is, your thinking has become aligned with the pain body and you have become unconscious and vulnerable to the pain's body attack. Unconscious, the way that I use the word here, means to be identified with some mental or emotional pattern. It implies a complete absence of the watcher. Sustained conscious attention severs the link between the pain body and your thought processes and brings about the process of transmutation. It is as if the pain becomes fuel for the flame of your consciousness, which then burns more brightly as a result. This is the esoteric meaning of the ancient art of alchemy, the transmutation of base metal into gold, of suffering into consciousness. The sleep within is healed and you become whole again. Your responsibility then is not to create further pain. Let me summarize the process. Focus attention on the feeling inside you. Know that it is the pain body. Accept that it is there. Don't think about it. Don't let the feeling turn into thinking. Don't judge or analyze. Don't make an identity for yourself out of it. Stay present and continue to be the observer of what is happening inside you. Become aware not only of the emotional pain but also of the ones who observes. The silent watcher. This is the power of the now, the power of your own conscious presence. Then see what happens. For many women, the pain body awakens particularly at the time preceding the menstrual flow. I will talk about this and the reason for it in more detail later. Right now, let me just say this. If you are able to stay alert and present at that time and watch whatever you feel within rather than be awakened over by it, it affords an opportunity for the most people powerful spiritual practice, and a rapid transmutation of all past pain becomes possible. Ego identification with the pain body. The process that I have just described, profoundly powerful yet simple. It could be taught to a child, and hopefully one day it will be one of the first things children learn in school. Once you have understood the basic principle of being present as the watcher of what happens inside you, and you understood it by experiencing it, you have at your disposal the most potent transformational tool. This is not to deny that you may encounter intense inner resistance to disidentifying from your pain. This will be the case particularly if you have lived closely identified with your emotional pain body for most of your life and the whole of a large part of your sense of self is invested in it. What this means is that you have made an unhappy self out of your pain body and believe that this mind-made fiction is who you are. In that case, unconscious fear of losing your identity will create strong resistance to any disidentification. In other words, you would rather be in pain, be the pain body, than take a leap into the unknown and risk losing the familiar unhappy self. If this applies to you, observe the resistance within yourself. Observe the attachment to your pain. Be very alert. Observe the peculiar pleasure you derive from being unhappy. Observe the compulsion to talk or think about it. The resistance will cease if you make it conscious. You can take your attention into the pain body. Stay present as the witness and so initiate its transmutation. Only you can do this. Nobody can do it for you. But you are fortunate enough to find someone who is intensely conscious. If you can be with them and join them in the state of presence, that can be helpful and will accelerate things. In this way, your own light will quickly grow stronger. When a log that has only just started to burn is placed next to one that is burning fiercely, and after a while they are separated again, the first log will be burning with much greater intensity. After all, it is the same fire. To be such a fire is one of the functions of a spiritual teacher. Some therapists may also be able to fulfill that function provided that they have gone beyond the level of mind and can create and sustain a state of intense conscious presence while they are working with you. The origin of fear. You mentioned fear as being part of our basic underlying emotional pain. How does fear arise? And why is there so much of it in people's lives? And isn't a certain amount of fear just healthy self-protection? If I didn't have a fear of fire, I might put my hand in it and get burned. The reason why don't put your hand in the fire is not because of fear. It's because you know that you will get burned. You don't need a fear to avoid unnecessary danger. Just a minimum of intelligence and common sense. For such practical matters, it is useful to apply the lessons learned in the past. Now, if someone threatens you with fire or with physical violence, you might experience something like fear. This is an instinctive shrinking back from danger, but not psychological condition of fear that we are talking about here. The psychological condition of fear is divorced from any concrete and true immediate danger. It comes in many forms: unease, worry, anxiety, nervousness, tension, dread, phobia, and so on. This kind of psychological fear is always of something that might happen, not of something that is happening now. You are in the here and now, while your mind is in the future. This creates an anxiety gap. And if you are identified with your mind and have lost touch with the power and simplicity of the now, the anxiety gap will be your constant companion. You can always cope with the present moment, but you cannot cope with something that is only a mind projection. You cannot cope with the future. Moreover, as long as you are identified with your mind, the ego runs your life, as I pointed out earlier. Because of its phantom nature and despite elaborate defense mechanisms, the ego is very vulnerable and secureable, and it sees itself are constantly under threat. This, by the way, is the case even if the ego is outwardly very confident. Now, remember that an emotion is the body's reaction to your mind. What message is the body receiving continuously from the ego? The false mind-made self, danger, I am under threat. And what is the emotion generated by this continuous message? Fear, of course. Fear seems to have many causes. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being hurt, and so on. But ultimately, all fear is the ego's fear of death, of annihilation. To the ego, death is always just around the corner. In this mind-identified state, fear of death affects every aspect of your life. For example, even such a seemingly trivial and normal thing as the compulsive need to be right an argument and make the other person wrong, depending the mental position with which you have identified, is due to the fear of death. If you identify with the mental position, then if you are wrong, your mind-based sense of self is seriously threatened with annihilation. So you as the ego cannot afford to be wrong. To be wrong is to die. Wars have been fought over this, and countless relationships have broken down. Once you have this identified from your mind, whether you are right or wrong makes no difference to your sense of self at all. So the forcefully compulsive and deeply unconscious need to be right, which is a form of violence, will no longer be here, or will no longer be there. You can state clearly and firmly how you feel or what you think, but there will be no aggressiveness or defensiveness about it. Your sense of self is then derived from a deeper and truer place within yourself, not from the mind. Watch out for any kind of defensiveness within yourself. What are you defending? An illusory identity, an image in your mind, a fictitious entity. By making this pattern conscious, by witnessing it, you disidentify from it. In the light of your consciousness, the unconsciousness pattern will then quickly dissolve. This is the end of all the arguments and power games which are so corrosive to relationships. Power over others is weakness disguised as strength. True power is within, and it is available to you now. So anyone who is identified with their mind, and therefore disconnected from their true power, their deeper self rooted in being, will have fear as their constant companion. The number of people we've gone beyond mind is as yet extremely small. So you can assume that virtually everyone you meet or know lives in a state of fear. Only the intensity of it varies. It fluctuates between anxiety and dread at one end of the scale and a vague, unease and distant sense of threat at the other. Most people becomes conscious of it only when it takes on one of its more acute forms. The ego search for wholeness, another aspect of the emotional pain that is an intrinsic part of the egoic mind, is a deep-seated sense of lack or incompleteness, of not being whole. In some people, this is conscious, in others, unconscious. If it is conscious, it manifests as the unsettling and constant feeling of not being worthy or good enough. If it is unconscious, it will only be felt indirectly as an intense craving, wanting, and needing. In either case, people will often enter into a compulsive pursuit of ego gratification and things to identify with in order to fill this hole they feel within. So they strive after possessions, money, success, power, recognition, or a special relationship, basically so that they can feel better about themselves, feel more complete. But even when they attain all these things, they soon find that the hole is still there, that it is bottomless. They are really in trouble because they cannot delude themselves anymore. Well, they can do, but it gets more difficult. As long as the egoic mind is running your life, you cannot truly be at ease. You cannot be at peace or fulfilled except for brief intervals. When you obtain what you wanted, when a craving has just been fulfilled. Since the ego is the derived sense of self, it needs to identify with external things. It needs to be both dependent and fed constantly. The most common ego identifications have to do with possessions, the work you do, social status and recognition, knowledge and education, physical appearance, special abilities, relationships, personal and family history, belief systems, and often also political, nationalistic, racial, religious, and other collective identifications. None of this is you. Do you find this frightening? Or is it a relief to know this? All of these things you will have to relinquish sooner or later, perhaps to find it as yet hard to believe, and I am certainly not asking you to believe that your identity cannot be found in any of those things. You will know the truth of it for yourself. You will know it at the latest when you feel dread approaching. Death is a stripping away of all that is not you. The secret of life is to die before you die and find that there is no death. Moving deeply into the now. Don't seek your life in the mind. I feel that there is still a great deal I need to learn about the workings of my mind before I can get anywhere near full consciousness or spiritual enlightenment. No, you don't. The problems of the mind cannot be solved on the level of the mind. Once you have understood the basic dysfunction, there isn't really much else that you need to learn or understand. Studying the complexities of the mind may take you a good psychologist, but doing so won't take you beyond the mind. Just as the study of madness isn't enough to create sanity. You have already understood the basic mechanics of the unconscious state. Identification with the mind, which create a false self, the ego, as a substitute for your true self rooted in being. You become as a branch cut off from the vine, as Jesus puts. The ego needs are endless. It feels vulnerable and threatened, and so lives in a state of fear and want. Once you know how the basic dysfunction operates, there is no need to explore all its countless manifestations. No need to make it into a complex personal problems. The ego, of course, loves that. It is always seeking for something to attach itself to in order to uphold and strengthen its illusory sense of self. Mega love shout out to Mikay Ramada. Mega love shout out sa iyo for following here. and it will readily attach itself to your problems. This is why, for so many people, a large part of their sense of self is intimately connected with their problems. Once this has happened, the last thing they want is to become free of them. That would mean loss of self. There can be a great deal of unconscious ego investment in pain and suffering. So once you recognize the root of unconscious as identification with the mind, which of course includes the emotions, you step out of it, you become present. When you are present, you can allow the mind to be as it is without getting entangled in it. The mind in itself is not dysfunctional. It is a wonderful tool. Dysfunction sets, and when you seek yourself in it, mistake it for who you are, and it then becomes the egoic mind and takes over your whole life. And the delusion of time. It seems almost impossible to disidentify from the mind. We are all immersed in it. How do you teach a fish to fly? Here is the key. And the delusion of time. Time and mind are inseparable. Become time from the mind and it stops. Unless you choose to use it. To be identified with your mind is to be trapped in time. The compulsion to live almost exclusively through memory and anticipation. Okay, baba muna ako, host ng LS din ako, sabi ni Mikay Ramada. Okay, Mikay Ramada, maraming salamat. This creates an endless preoccupation with past and future, an unwillingness to honor and acknowledge the present moment and allow it to be. The compulsion arises because the past gives you an identity and the future holds the promise of salvation, of fulfillment in whatever form. Both are illusions. But without a sense of time, how could we function in this world? There would be no goals to strive toward anymore. I wouldn't even know who I am because my past makes me who I am today. I think time is something very precious and we need to learn to use it wisely rather than waste it. Time isn't precious at all because it is an illusion. What you perceive as precious is not time, but the one point that is out of time, the now. That is precious indeed. The more you are focused on time, past and future, the more you miss the now. Sarap basahin ulit to Ulitin ko guys Time isn't precious at all because it is an illusion. What you perceive as precious is not time, but the one point that is out of time, the now. The now. That is precious indeed. The more you are focused on time, past and future, the more you miss the now. The most precious thing there is. Why is it the most precious thing? Firstly, because it is the only thing. It's all there is. The eternal present is the space within which your whole life unfolds. The one factor that remains constant. Life is now. There was never a time when your life was not now. There will never ever be. Second, Secondly, the now is the only point that can take you beyond the limited confines of the mind, is your only point of access into the timeless and formless realm of being. Nothing exists outside the now. Aren't past and future just as real, sometimes even more real than the present? After all, the past determines who we are, as well as how we perceive and behave in the present, and our future goals determine which actions we take in the present. You haven't yet grasped the essence of what I am saying because you are trying to understand it mentally. The mind cannot understand this. Only you can. Please just listen. Have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside the now? Do you think you ever will? It is possible for anything to happen or be outside the now. The answer is obvious. It is not. Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now. What you think of as the past is a memory trace stored in the mind of a former now. When you remember the past, you reactivated a memory trace. And you do so now. The future is an imagined now, a projection of the mind. When the future comes, it comes as the now. When you think about the future, you do it now. Past and future obviously have no reality of their own, just as the moon has no light of its own, but can only reflect the light of the sun. Now, Quabens Chris Angel Sis, ninja ko ito. Ay, Mikay Ramada. Hello, hello. So our past and future only pale reflections of the light, power, and reality of the eternal present. Their reality is borrowed from the now. The essence of what I am saying there or here cannot be understood by the mind. The moment you grasp it, there is a shift in consciousness from mind to being, from time to presence. Suddenly, everything feels alive, radiates energy, emanates being. The key to the spiritual dimension. In life-threatening emergent situations, the shift in consciousness from time to presence sometimes happens naturally. The personality that has a past and a future momentarily recedes that and is replaced by an intense conscious presence, very still but very alert at the same time. Whatever response is needed then arises out of that state of consciousness. The reason why some people love to engage is dangerous activities such as mountain climbing, car racing, and so on. Although they may not be aware of it, is that it forces them into the now, that intensely alive state that is free of time, free of problems, free of thinking, free of the burden of the personality. Slipping away from the present moment even for a second may mean death. Unfortunately, they come to depend on a particular activity to be in that state. But you don't need to climb the north face of the eagle. You can enter the state now. Since the ancient times, spiritual masters of all traditions have pointed to the now as the key to the spiritual dimensions. Despite this, it seems to have remained a secret. It is certainly not taught in churches and temples. If you go to a church, you may hear readings from the Gospel such as "Take no thought for the morrow. For the morrow shall take thought for the kings itself." Or "Nobody who puts his hands to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Or you might hear the passage about the beautiful flowers that are anxious about tomorrow, but live with ease in the timeless now and are the privilege. Now are the provided for abundantly by God. The depth and radical nature of these teachings are not recognized. No one seems to realize that they are meant to be lived, and so boring about the profound inner transformations. The whole essence of Zen consists in walking along the razor edge of now, to be so utterly, so completely present that no problem, no suffering, nothing that is not who you are in your presence can survive in you. In the now, in the absence of time, all your problems dissolve. Suffering needs time. It cannot survive in the now. The great Zen master Rinzai, in order to take his students away tensions away from time, would often raise his finger and slowly ask, "What at this moment is lacking?" A powerful question that does not require an answer on the level of the mind. It is designed to take your attention deeply into the now. A similar questions in the Zen tradition is this: if not now, when? The now is also central of the teaching of Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam. Sufis have a saying, "The Sufi is the son of time present," and Rumi, the great poet and teacher of Sufism, declares, "Past and future veil God from our sight. Burn up both of them with fire." Mr. Eckhart, the 13th century spiritual teacher, sum it all up beautifully: time is what keeps the light from reaching us. There is no greater obstacle to God than time. Accessing the power of now. A moment ago, when you talk about the eternal present and the unreality of past and future, I found myself looking at the tree outside the window. I had looked at it a few times before, but this time it was different. The external perception had not changed much, except that the color seems brighter and more vibrant. But there was now an added dimension to it. This is hard to explain. I don't know how, but I was aware of something invisible that I felt was the essence of the tree, its inner spirit, if you like, and somehow it was part of that. I realized now that I hadn't truly seen the tree before, just a flat and red image of it. When I look at the tree now, some of that awareness is still present, but I cannot feel it slipping away. You see, the experience is already receding into the past. Can something like this ever be more than a fleeting glimpse? You were free of time for a moment. You move into the now and therefore perceive the tree without the screen of mind. The awareness of being became part of your perception. With the timeless dimension comes a different kind of knowing. One that does not kill the spirit that lives within every creature and everything. A knowing does not destroy a sacredness and mystery of life, but contains a deep love and reverence for all that is. A knowing of which the mind knows nothing. The mind cannot know the tree. It can only facts or information about the tree. My mind cannot know you, only labels, judgments, facts, and opinions about you. Being alone knows directly. There is a place for mine and my knowledge. It is in the practical realm of day-to-day living. However, when it takes over all aspects of your life, including your relationships with other human beings and with nature, it becomes a monstrous parasite that unchecked may well end up killing all life on the planet and finally itself by killing its host. You have a glimpse of how the timeless can transform your perceptions, but an experience is not enough. No matter how beautiful or profound, what is needed and what we are concerned with is a permanent shift in consciousness. Ayun guys, nabasa natin yung librong The Power of Now. Change ambient tayo. Mega love shoutout sa lahat. And we are back. Aalis na tayo dun sa ating binabasa. Alright. Alright. Dance with the beat, with the music. Sa mga hindi pa nag-subscribe, please subscribe my channel. Alright, let's go. At wala pa sila. Where are them? This is the beat of the music. And this is your host, DJ Nemee Keeyo. Time check, it's 8:58 in the evening. Currently playing Find Me Here by Patrick Keeyo. Dance to the beat. Hello. Let's do it, guys. Let's do it. Move on. Set Fileg. Mega love shoutout sa'yo sa FB Group GC. Let's move it. Dance. Maraming salamat sa tumambay kanina sa aking pagbabasa ng librong The Power of Now, NOW. Mega love shoutout sa mga wala na ngayon kay Mikay Ramada, Ninja Dayan, Last Vlog, Sarvlog TV, Quabas, Chris Angel at sa mga ninja, at kay Azil Ashram, Kong Ivan, RJJ Kellerer at sa mga army niya, at kay JM Cruz at kay Josh TV. Please like, share and subscribe din sa mga channel nila. Let's do it, guys, let's do it. Mega love shout out to Chicken Nanax. Ho! This is your host with the energetic moves, and we are live. This is Nemee Keeyo. We are dancing with the beat. dun. Dancing with the beat. Kaya pala nawala. Salamat sa 3 million people in the house na nakatambay pa rin sa ating YouTube live. This is your host, Nemee Keeyo. Ambot sa imong lubot. Please support, guys. Sa mga hindi pa nakasupport dyan, please support. Support! Come on! Come on! Sira yung mic ah. Wow! Let's move it! Come on! Say ho! Say oh ho ho! Yeah. Wow. Get it up, yo! Dance with the Black Mamba here. Let's play some music. Come on. Mega love shoutout kay Honet and Carlo sa FB Live. Nagpapa-shoutout sila. Salamat sa ating 2 million people in the house na nakatambay pa rin sa ating bahay. Let's feel the beat of the music. This is your host, Nemee Keeyo. Ito ka. Mega love shout out to Adrian James Labastilla. Shout out kay Clacky Chiborg. Mega love shout out to Chris Angel. Mega love shoutout to everyone! Kahit sino dyan, basta shoutout sa inyo. Okay guys, I'll be ending soon. Thank you all guys to the support. Shout out kay Felix J. Bar. Shout out to Nanak Squad. Shout out sa Nanak Squad. And I'll be ending soon my live stream. Maraming salamat sa lahat. Kalagot kay wala ko'y chat heads. Sabi ni Preset Pile. Naglagot siya kay wala siya chat heads. Shout out kay E. James. Sabi ni Lulay Dilat. Come on. Instant regret sa iPhone. Sabi ni Chris Black. Lulay Dilalat, sabi niya, yay! Mega love shoutout sa lahat ng tropang gamers. Shoutout kay Frenzy. Naku po, hindi nyo naabutan. Dito pa kayo nag-shoutout sa ending. Kaya nga eh. Shoutout kay Frenzy dyan. And I'm still having 1 minute.